Alison Goodman is a Melbourne-based author known for her fantasy and historical fiction, including the 2023 hit Benevolent Society of Ill-Mannered Ladies, a Washington Post and Amazon mystery book. With a PhD in creative writing and Regency-era research, Alison is working on the third book in the Ill-Mannered Ladies series. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure.
My first question is, what drew you to writing?
In the first place, I've been writing since I was studying in university. So I think it was because I was a great reader as a child, and that kind of progressed into me wanting to do something creative. And at first I thought it would be filmmaking. So I studied filmmaking for a year, and then I thought, part of the course was that you had to write your own film. I thought, I actually enjoy the writing more than I did the filmmaking. So I thought maybe I would actually enjoy writing as a career more than that. So I then went and changed my course of studies into professional writing, and that's where I went off.
Did you find it hard to be more creative when you were studying, and it changed when you went into full-time writing, or you still had your creativity when you were doing all your assignments and everything?
It's a different thing, isn't it? Because within a university environment, you're writing for marks and things like that, so it can change things. But the course that I was in was really good. It was all about building craft skills and making that leap into art, because of course writing is both a craft and an art. And there's some things that you can teach, but there are other things that have to come from one's unique voice. So when I went into full-time writing, because it was a gradual transition, because having to write part-time, work part-time, to support yourself. So I think that it's about kind of marrying what kind of work will support the creativity. And initially I thought that teaching creative writing would help, but I actually found that to be a bad marriage for me. I do enjoy teaching creative writing, but when I'm teaching creative writing, I don't have a lot of sort of space for my own creativity. So now I'm writing full time, and I find that's there's moments when it's kind of like just full on creativity, and then there's those lulls. And I think that's within every kind of creative life, when you have those kind of moments when you're not as creative, but you just got to sit with them. So when people say, do you ever get writer's block? I actually call it writer's pause, because it's kind of like, mainly it's because you haven't sat with an idea enough, or you haven't done enough research, especially for historical fiction. And then you just need to refill that well.
Do you find when you're with teaching creative writing, do you find that you typically have a lot of ideas? Because I'm a teacher myself, and when I'm teaching the kids writing, I can come up with so many ideas, but the kids are struggling, and I don't know whether if it's because I read so widely and some of them just don't have that love of reading to help them with their writing. Do you still find it with the adults?
I think that generally with adult students, they've come into the course with strong ideas, and then as a teacher, I feel like the job is to kind of make sure that those ideas are well-rounded and they have the craft to support the story they want to tell. So I think that probably with teaching adult students is that they do have that background of loving reading, so they do know the tropes, they do know that kind of basis, whereas kids are still learning those things. But I do find that sometimes a student, and I don't teach creative writing at the moment, I haven't for a little while, but some students will think, I've got this original idea, and of course what it is a trope. I just haven't come across it before. So it's kind of like, you just need to read a bit more widely in your genre to actually know what it is. So there's it's a constant learning process.
What inspired your Ill-Mannered Ladies series?
My Ill-Mannered Ladies series. Well, it's about two 42-year-old spinster twins in the Regency who are tired of their high society life, and they're considered to be old maids at that age because they're unmarried, and they decided to use their invisibility as older women to help other women in trouble. So they're kind of like, not vigilantes, we won't call them that, but they are kind of working towards helping other women in terrible situations, and there were many terrible situations in the Regency as there are today. So what prompted it was that I was reading I love Regency fiction. And I grew up with Georgia Hare, and of course with Jane Austen. But the heroines were always quite young. There seemed to be a cut-off point of around 28.
They were not in books.
No. I thought, no, what if 42-year-old women were having adventures? So the book is adventure mystery. It's cut up into 3 cases like Sherlock Holmes. So each case looks at a particular kind of perilous situation the women were in at that time, and how Lady Augusta and Lady Julia confront those issues and solve them through cleverness and their wily kind of ingenuity. There's a little bit of romance in there as well, but it's not at the forefront. The forefront is this sister bond and the way that they're having these adventures. So it was really about me wanting to write what I wanted to read, and I do like a good adventure, and I just love the Regency era. So all of that came into a kind of like, all of my misfit youth, and all of my Georgia Hare reading, and all of those things came into this kind of one moment where it's like, the Benevolent Society of Ill-Mannered Ladies.
Did you have to do much more research because you had that love of Regency? Did you do much more of a deep dive for your stories?
Well, yeah, I wrote before the Benevolent Society of Ill-Mannered Ladies, I wrote the Lady Helen series, and that's what I call Pride and Prejudice meets Buffy.
Yeah.
So that's Supernatural and the Regency. And I did a deep dive for those books, 8 months of full-time research, and I was lucky enough to have that time to do it. And I just learned everything I could about the society and about the political situation, because it's 1812, which is the Napoleonic Wars. And also sort of like the religious life and all those kind of things, all those kind of aspects that create that society. And I also wanted to be able to write a scene and know what kind of carpet would be on the floor and how they would like their room. So that was all embedded in me. So when I came to the Benevolent Society of Ill-Mannered Ladies, I already had that world sort of in me. And I just needed to do the research that was for that particular book. And that's, some of that is some of the historical figures that appear in it, like Fanny Burney, the diarist. She makes a cameo appearance. And Beau Brummel, who was the fashion icon of the time. So these kind of historical figures are actually in there, and they require quite a bit of research.
What is your writing process after you do all your research and you go to sit down and writing? Do you have a plot? Have you plotted your books, or do you sort of go through the story takes you where it takes you?
Yeah, that's the way. I used to, when I wrote my first book in 1998, which was Singing the Dogstar Blues, that was storyboarded so much. It was so planned. And I've done a lot of study of writing, and in fact I've done a PhD now. I'm a doctor, Dr. L. And a lot of my study's been about structure and about how you put a story together. So whereas I started off storyboarding so much, I now have relaxed a bit more into it. I'm not in any way a pantser, there's a plotter and a pantser. I still have the beats of the story that I have in place before I start, so I know where it's going. But there's a bit more organic movement between those beats. But those beats are always informed by character. So if my character can't do something, if I feel like the character that I built won't do something in that plot beat, then either the plot beat has to change, or I need to go back and change that character. But usually the character will define it. So I think that now my process is more, I do think a lot about the structure of how something is going to be built. As I said, the Benevolent Society of Ill-Mannered Ladies is in 3 cases. In book 2, which is called The Ladies' Road Guide to Utter Ruin.
Perfect title.
So that's coming out in May next year, 2025. And that's actually 2 cases, because I've been allowed a lot of freedom within how I structure it. And the 3rd book, which I'm writing now, which will probably only be one long case, it'll be like just a normal novel in that kind of sense, so it won't be 2 parts. And then I'll probably go back to 3 stories again. It's like whatever the particular stories need and that kind of thing. So, but my day-to-day process is, well, there's a lot more admin in a writing career than you'd think. So my morning is admin, and then the afternoon when I think I'm lucid between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. That's when I do my creative work, sometimes 4 p.m. And that's at the beginning of the novel. And then as I progress through the novel and my deadline looms, I get more and more hours in the writing aspect, until probably just near kind of the climax of the novel. I'm probably writing about 6 or 7 hours a day, which will be quite tiring, but you know, you're in that mode of doing it, yeah. So, and then I write chronologically, so I write from beginning to end. I don't ever jump ahead, because I'm building suspense and that thriller, so I'm building it for myself as well. And yeah, so that's how I basically build the story.
Do you have your characters already, you said that it's more character driven along the plot beats. Do you have your characters sort of already in your mind before you start writing? And do you have like a spreadsheet or anything just to keep all the details of the character?
That's an interesting question, because I have sort of what I call portals to the characters. So I choose 2 or 3 main events in the character's early life, and they can be traumatic or they can be good, whatever they are. And often I will say, well, what portal is that character going to be working through for this scene? You know, if it's a portal of, let's say a character was abandoned when they were very little, is that abandonment going to be coming in through that kind of character scene? So I have those in place, but I do build as I go along. Of course, now that Lady Augusta and Lady Julia have had a whole book of adventures, their characters are pretty much set in terms of where I'm going to go with them. There's always, I mean, character growth is what we read for. It's about, you know, the emotional journey, but their base character is now there, but now we have to look at what lessons are these women going to be learning as they go through their adventures, because it's always about that arc of character growth.
Do you have the character growth planned out across multiple books, or do you have they have a different growth happening in each book?
Yeah, different growth each book. I think that keeps it fresh. And we've all got so many lessons to learn.
Never stop learning.
Never stop learning. And you know, Gus is a very strong character. She's the narrator of the Benevolent Society of Women Ladies, and it's first-person narration. So, and being a very strong character, she's got some very fixed ideas that may have to be challenged as she goes along. And her sister, of course, has her own arcs as well, and it's probably more about coming out from under her sister's older sister by 15 minutes, you know, from behind her. So it's a good dynamic, and then there are fraternal twins, so they're not identical, they're fraternal twins. So there's a lot of great kind of bond work between them, but of course a bit of argy too.
What advice would you give to a writer working on their first book?
On their first book, I think my advice would be to get some books about structure, because if you can get your structure strong, it gives you a much better chance within the market. This is if you wanted to publish professionally. I'd also think about the fact that a story is about a character's growth. That's the spine of the story. The actual plot and the decisions, sort of like the goal of the character, is not the true story. It's the character's need, the flaw that they need to heal. That's the true story. And once that flaw is healed, or that issue is addressed, then that's the end of the story. So yeah, because I always think about it. If we look at the James Bond movies, yeah, the early James Bond's goal is to save the Earth, save the world. He has no character growth. It's all about and when he saves the world, that's the end of the story. But in the later James Bond movies, like the ones that we have now, we did have with Daniel Craig, he was more self-reflective. He had some actual emotional needs, and so we saw the character having to come to peace with M in Skyfall. Yeah. And so we had an emotional arc, and that, of course, the story didn't end with saving the world, it ended with him coming to terms with that, to his relationship with them. So that's what I think it's more, the real story is about your character's emotional arcs, so spend time there.
I think a lot of people love that emotional element, that connection that we have with the characters, that what keeps us coming back to the stories and, you know, rereading them or wanting to explore that world with them as well.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, obviously, a novel or a story is always about multiple elements coming together to work towards a full experience. So you want your setting to be vivid. You know, you want your story plot to be strong. But you definitely want that character to go from a position of maybe, let's say, if it's a romance, that they are protecting themselves to opening themselves up to love. That's the kind of arc that we're looking at. It's about this kind of, what does that character need at the beginning of the story? How are they getting? How are they protecting themselves? What obstacles are they getting over to get over themselves? And then how do they go and create that kind of opening in their life?
What's the most important lesson you've learned as an author?
As an author, what's the most important question? That is a good question. There's so many things, you know, that you learn along the way. I think it's about sitting with your own process and learning your own process, because in my earlier sort of years as a writer, I'd be worried that the way I was writing wasn't right. That, you know, I should be doing this and I should be doing that. And what I've discovered is that the way that I write is right, and the way that everyone else writes is right. You know, the way that you are creative is your individual way of it. And of course you can have shortcuts and they may suit you, but not everything is going to suit everybody. So if you pick up some tools that suit you along the way, great. But don't feel obliged to, you know, plot if you don't feel like that you're a plotter, or don't feel like you need to blurt the whole book out and then edit if you're a meticulous planner. The way that you write is going to be, you know, the best way to cradle your own creativity.
And don't compare yourself to others. Like,
absolutely.
Everyone else has their own process.
They do.
You just need to find your own.
Yeah, and there's no sort of right way, you know, to be creative.
And my final question is, who is your biggest supporter of your writing?
My biggest supporter? Well, I would say that my husband is. I mean, he's sort of supported me in my career, and I support him in his career as well. So there's been that lovely kind of to and fro. But sort of also friends. I've got a best friend, Karen, who did the same courses as I did through uni. So we speak the same language, and she's a first reader, and she's very valuable in her critique. I have a fabulous editor that I use to look at my work, you know, till I get so the gremlin of self-doubt can get squashed. You know, yeah, lots of people. I mean, I think that, you know, when you have a career, and I've had a long career so far. Touch wood, where's the wood? You have a lot of people helping you along the way, because it takes a lot to get a book out into the world. So there's many people who have been great supporters.
You need to have your tribe sort of around you. You can't do it by yourself. You sort of do need people to keep you motivated. And
and to keep you sort of knowing that, you know, okay, I'm on the right track, or maybe I'm a bit off track here, or something's not working. I do say that when people do get their work critiqued, to always think, well, where is this person coming from? Because not all critique is equal, of course. But do listen to critique. It's very important. If someone says, oh, I found it a bit slow or something like that, they probably can't pinpoint what's going wrong, but if there's something that is not quite sitting right with them, take it and look at it and see whether or not, you know, there is something wrong. To actually be able to diagnose a story is quite a specific skill. And if you do writing courses, you probably will learn those skills. But if you're giving your work to people who are keen readers but may not have the language, you may need to decode a little bit more. And often I'll say this, often when someone says, oh, I didn't like this bit here, often the problem is in the setup. So always think about how I set something up, is it set up correctly? So it's a bit kind of nebulous, but that's what I've learned.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.